Well, welcome back to part two of how you and your brain react to code. And first of all, let me give you some credentials and a little preface to this talk. I've been using code for about 60 years now, and there's been ups and downs to it. Learning, I decided to upgrade my skills until at 70 years old. So I can tell you that your brain is still welcoming to CW even at an older age. I've been advising students since 2017. And the other thing I want to tell you, I'm not a neurologist. I'm not a doctor. I've just tried to investigate why things happen in your brain, especially since I've done it at 70 years old. When I learned at 14, I really wasn't interested in why or how. I just wanted to get my license, like most people. At 5 words a minute, you start, you're trying to get the 13 word a minute general. So I wasn't too interested in how the brain was reacting, nor probably could I ever study it, because maybe that information wasn't available then. Well, it is now, a lot of it. So I decided at 70 to pay more attention to what was happening up there, because some things happened that I wasn't familiar with at the time, and it was very enlightening when it did. So I encourage you to fact check anything you want to. It's a interesting subject to investigate, and it certainly helps you in your understanding of CW, gives you more respect for it, what you're really trying to do. And once you study and get to the skill level that you would like, you can be proud of yourself that you did this. You educated your brain. These facts were taken from the National Institute of Health, Harvard School of Teaching and Learning, Psychology Today, Medical News Today, and the Alzheimer's Association. Now, the Alzheimer's Association, what's that got to do with code? Well, turns out code is very beneficial in exercising your brain. It helps keep brain disease away. The exercise is very important, just like it is for your body. Don't neglect your brain. And we'll go through that a little bit here shortly. So how does the brain efficiently learn, and why do we study differently than we did in the past? Why is it better now than it used to be? In some ways easier than it used to be. In some ways at the beginning harder than it used to be. There's a reason. So we're going to go through that. We're going to give you appreciation of what's going on in your head at the time so you can more competently control your emotions while you're learning. And also, we're going to go over some areas that skilled operators know and use, and dazzle people that don't know code or are stuck at lower skill levels. How did they get there? What are they doing? We never got that far if we quit. So maybe there's a carrot, out there on the end of the stick, or something at the end of the rainbow for all your hard work. Well, there it is. It gets easier. Believe me. So learning code is much like learning English. Back when we were little babies, kids, elementary school, we spent years all the way through high school taking English, some through college, grammar, vocabulary, learning how to spell words. Learning the sound of words is one of the first things we learned. When your mom pointed to a furry creature walking around in your house and said, dog, you eventually learned that was a dog, or it was Fido, whoever. But you learned that word. Did you know how to spell it then? Nope. That came years later when you're in school. So we're going to do a little bit differently with code, and we're going to start with the characters first. We already know the alphabet. We already know how to spell. That's a big advantage we've got. We already know English grammar. We don't have to learn that. So in some ways, code is a lot easier than learning a foreign language. So let's dive into this a little bit. So we know we already have some advantages with character sounds. We know what C is as related to the alphabet. We know what cat is immediately by the sound of that whole word. It's just a sound. Now, the one thing that's different about CW than English is CW is not visual. There's nothing about CW that's going to be visual for you. And if you start using those visual aids, then you're going to have a problem. And we'll go over that problem. It's going to manifest itself. At first, it's going to be easy to use. The easiest way to learn is visually. But the problem is, code is more audio. So, audible sounds only. So what we're doing with code is, we're just adding new sounds for characters and words that we already know. Right? Just a new sound. A C is a C in the alphabet. It's dotted in code. Now, a skilled operator, if you say dotted, he, just as fast as you know C when I say it, he knows C when he hears the code sound. Now, let's get back to the brain a little bit. There's 86 billion neurons in your brain, storage areas for information. And those storage areas or neurons have links, or synapse is the correct word. But I'll use links a lot of times because it's just easier. This is a layman's type of explanation of the code. Again, I'm not a doctor, I'm not a neurologist, but the correct term is a synapse. And those synapses can be linked to different neurons in the brain. So we have reference. C can mean a lot of things. It can mean a character. It can mean SEA, the sea, ocean. It can mean SEE, I see something. But it's all the same sound. How does that work? C, C, C. Well, there's references. That C has a lot of references going out from it, different things. It can have hundreds to thousands of those little links going off. And the interesting thing, what does a synapse look like? It's a gap. Two neurons, there's a gap between them. That gap is very narrow, 20 to 40 nanometers. Pretty close. So that's how they relate to one another. They're called neurotransmitters. They can be chemical in between that gap, the chemical, or it can be electrical. The electrical is tied to the fight or flight, very fast. Speed, interconnection speed between neurons can be 2 milliseconds. Maybe that's something we want to use for CW, huh? We don't want it. Seconds is too long. Okay. Generally, our audio sounds are retained. There is some doubt one way or the other where they're retained, but it seems to me that they would be retained in the short-term memory. The longer you study something, the more you're going to retain it, and hopefully, if you study it long enough, you'll retain it for the rest of your life, if you use it. So the short-term memory is very short, especially when we don't use it. uh, very much. So one of the main things that we have to do is increase that time in short-term memory when we're first studying. And we'll get into that. To retain that, in other words, to retain it, to move it into long-term memory, we need to have repetition in studying that. And now we'll revert maybe over to a little bit more CW. That's where ICR, instant character recognition, comes in. Every day. I've learned that it works, but it's not very beneficial to wait 5 weeks to start ICR training after you've supposedly learned all the characters. You need to do this right at the time when you first learn the characters, and you have to, it's additive. So you add new characters to old characters. The old characters may be a day, 3 days old. You just learned 4 3 days ago. You're going to learn 4 or 5 more today. You got to study all the characters, old and new, all the way through about a 5-week course of study that you can individually do, or you can do it through other means. So this is why ICR is so important. I find if you do that, you're going to be so much further ahead at the end of the time. If you wait, you're going to have a lot of weak characters. And what does that mean? Weak characters. We're trying to link that dotted back to the C. It's a new sound that we're trying to when we hear it, we immediately think of C in the alphabet. Now, when we first, again, this is layman's talk, we're building this synapse, this link. We need to build a link back to it. At first, it's like a rocky dirt road. It's very slow to recollect, to travel that road. We want to make it into a super highway. We want to make it fast, pretty fast, fast as we can make it. Maybe 2 milliseconds. Wouldn't that be nice, huh? So those are the things that we're going to try to be doing when we first learn the letters of code. Okay, and that's going to take some concentration. Maybe more concentration that we are used to doing, and that's a good thing. That's a good thing because this is brain exercise. We're doing this for our brain exercise, not only just to learn a new mode so we can get on the air and work some more DX or something. It's going to be beneficial in a lot of different ways if we stick with this and use it afterwards. Now, brain diseases. When you start investigating synapse and neurons and things, you'll run across dementia and Alzheimer's diseases. If you're predisposed, in other words, the onset can be delayed up to 5 years. If you learn, not just, could be other things than CW, could be a foreign language, could be a musical instrument. But generally, the people that are watching this will be radio operators, and we have a hobby in common, and this is a way to develop your hobby into another facet. If you use something like this, you can reduce your risk of brain disease, I've read, up to 29%. So again, it's a good thing to try and learn. And it doesn't have to be a crash rest. This is not a hurry up thing. This is not a cram thing. If you do, you'll be frustrated. I treat it much like working a crossword puzzle when I was upgrading my skills, because then I paid attention to them. I was 70 years old. Why are these things happening? I don't know. That's what eventually led up to what we're doing at this moment. I wanted to spread it around a little bit. I've not really read a whole lot, CW and the brain, how it works, how to study correctly. I tell my students from day one, the most important thing you're going to learn, because learning code, learning the characters, that's a given. We're going to learn that. Uh, but the most important thing you're going to learn is how to study. And if you learn how to study correctly, the world is your oyster then. You won't be hitting plateaus. You won't be hitting pitfalls. And how does this happen? Why has it been daunting to learn CW all this time if you don't know some of the newer ways? Why was it daunting 50, 60 years ago? We hit plateaus. Many people quit because they would get to a certain point and it wasn't so easy anymore. They could handle it up to a point, and then they weren't progressing. And then they decided, for various reasons, they would quit. The easiest way to eliminate frustration is to quit. Those people that know code must have something special in their brain, and I don't have it. So can't do it. It's not the case. Sorry, it's not the case. So learning CW has changed throughout the years. Because we've learned a little bit about the brain, we've paid attention to how we learn things, not just CW, but anything. How do we learn something? And two major factors caused our frustration back in the ye old days. And both of them one was slightly debilitating, the other one was really bad, caused quitting. And first of all, to get our novice licenses, we were learning code at 5 words a minute. Slow code turns out to be actually harder. We encoded our neurons, our brains, with these sounds. Remember, we're trying to encode new sounds to old sounds we know in English. The C, dotted. We're trying to encode that. If we encode our brains to a sound that sounds like da, dit, da, dit, sound familiar? Our brain will remember that. We'll repeat it. We'll embed it in our brains. And what happened? We turned on our radios, went down to the CW portion of the band, and we didn't hear anything like that. Even on the novice band, very few people back then were sending at 5 words a minute. They were generally sending faster than that. So what happened? We got frustrated. The brain is saying, how come you taught me this? I don't hear anything like this, and you want me to decode this stuff? What? I don't know. So now we had to struggle. We didn't know why, maybe. But we had to struggle. We had to relearn sounds. Maybe modify those links a little bit. And that took some time, and that was frustrating. It made it harder to get to our next level where we wanted to get our general license at 13 words a minute. It took longer. We only had a year to go, or else we were out at that time. So what do we do today to mitigate that? We don't teach character speeds at 5 words a minute anymore. Don't do that. We use 20 to 25 word a minute, and I use 25 word a minute character speeds, even in the beginning. Now, again, do not be intimidated by numbers of words per minute. Don't do that. You're tempted to. You hear fast code and you spin the dial. That's too fast for me. Well, what you're doing is not giving your brain a chance to learn it. So you get in the way of your brain. To recap a little bit, there's mentors, there's advisors. You are the teacher. I'm separating you and your brain. You are the teacher. Your brain is the student. Don't abuse your brain. Learn how to teach code. Well, I've not taught code before. I can't. I've tried to teach myself code before and it didn't work. That's why a mentor is important to you, because he can tell you the pitfalls that you're going to have. So once we got that taken care of, and we kind of modified our ICR that we were trying to get faster and faster, instant character recognition, to recall these characters at a new sound. The next thing we did was write down the characters. We wrote down words. That takes time. So we're trying to decode this sound. And if we can do it audibly, then we're working with the 2 millisecond transfer speeds, transmitting speeds, neurotransmitters. If we start writing things down, we're going to start adding up time. So what did this do? There's 2 important steps today to learn CW. And if you don't learn them, if you don't expand them, this is your memory, a short-term memory. We're not even doing that in the old days. We're writing things down. We recognize the characters, and we're writing them down on a piece of paper. If we're trying to decode a word, we write down all the characters as they come to us. We look, oh, that's dog. Dog, okay, because we visually looked at something. We're decoding it in the visual side of our brain, and now we've got it. All this adds up, all this time. So things are easy when we can do that at a very slow speed. So then we got to a certain speed, usually just below the 13 word a minute. We hit a plateau, we used to call it. Things were going as fast as they used to. We weren't progressing as fast. Why is that? I don't know. I guess my brain just can only go this fast, that's all. No. So let's take a look at how fast is CW? Why do we hit this barrier? Well, and I recommend this. You watch this. It's on YouTube, and if you search the word fastball, like baseball, fastball, one word, it'll take you to a documentary, and it's narrated by Kevin Costner, and it talks a little bit about how the brain reacts to pitched balls, namely the 100-mile-an-hour fastball. How does that differ from a 90-mile-an-hour fastball? Well, it's pretty fast. And they interview batters, pitchers, old-time ones, and some current players. What's it like? What's the difference in speed? Well, it turns out that a 100-mile-an-hour fastball takes about 396 milliseconds to get to the plate from the pitcher's hand. Pretty fast. The batter has about 200 milliseconds to determine if he's going to swing or not. Otherwise, it's going to be by him, no matter what. So your brain has to do some fast calculating here. It's a very interesting video. I would watch it if I were you. And they also interview some neurologists, some physicists, and they tell a little bit about how your brain reacts to these things. And if you think related to code, you'll be very interested in this. Now, of course, the batter has to swing. He has to do a physical thing to hit the ball. That takes a lot of time compared to what the brain can do. But He still only got 396 milliseconds. So now, how does that compare to CW? CW, you don't have to swing at anything. There's no physical part of it. But that batter is worrying about one fastball. He's got 200 milliseconds to swing at it after the pitcher throws it. At 20 words a minute, CW, and that's not particularly fast. Essentially, he's going to have a fastball thrown at him every 60 milliseconds. How about that? So your brain has to react to a particular bit of information, and then 60 milliseconds later, boom, there comes another one. Right? And you have to keep going. Just takes some effort here. So how fast is CW? We, in CW, a long time ago, they've decided that Paris, P-A-R-I-S, is a 5-letter word. It's a typical letter. In other words, it's elements. Elements are the dits and das in it. At 5 words a minute, Paris takes about 14 and a half seconds to send. That's doable. That's doable to write down, right? Might take you 5 seconds to remember, but you might be able to do that. The faster you remember the characters, then you're going to be in good shape. Now, at 13 words a minute, we go from 14 and a half seconds to about 4.5 seconds. So we have to be much faster. At 20 words a minute, we're talking about 60 milliseconds a character to recognize. At 30 words a minute, instead of 14.4 seconds at 5 words a minute, it's going to take you 2 seconds to send Paris. All 5 letters in 2 seconds. That's 40 milliseconds a character. 40 words a minute, 1.5 seconds to send, 30 milliseconds a character. So we don't have much time in between characters here. And they're coming at us, bing, 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 bing. All right. Now, let's go back to writing down code. You hear the character, and you're just learning, let's say, and it may be taking you 4 seconds to recall that character, 4 seconds. Your brain has to send an electrical signal down your arm into your hand to tell it to start writing. Now, that takes about 16 to 25 milliseconds, I read. All right. It takes another half a second to maybe a second, depending on how fast you write, to write down that character. And then you look at the character visually. That's the whole idea of writing it down. And you look at the character, and there it is. If you look at multiple characters, that might be a word. And as I said before, then you can decode it visually. All this takes time. Meanwhile, the code is keeping coming at 60 milliseconds a pop at 20 words a minute. That's a problem. We can't progress any further. We can't write that fast. Now, how can we do a little bit better? How did we get to 20 words a minute? And we went down to the FCC office, and they said, okay, copy 100 characters in a row, and you got your extra after you passed the written test. Actually, you took it before the written test, so they could eliminate people right away. How are you going to do that? Well, you had to practice writing faster. Your recovery time for recovering individual characters was faster. But you haven't practiced, when you write things down, any brain retention. And to gain speed in code, it's a two-step process. Yeah, you have to recall the character, but you also have to retain the character in your head. That's not been practiced yet in this method of taking code. So we just flat run out of time. That's what we've done. And as I said before, to make matters worse, you're not expanding your mental acuity, because that's the next thing that really you're learning that nowadays at the same time you're learning the characters. By repetition, you're making your short-term memory a little bit longer, and with more repetition, you're also making that short-term memory move into long-term memory, and then you don't have that problem. Okay. This manifests itself in students. It's totally normal if you send a word such as, we'll use wheel again, wheel, W-H-E-E-L. If I send a W, it might take 3-4 seconds to remember. H, another couple seconds. E, maybe that's easy. 1 second. E again, that's 1 second. L, might be 4 seconds. And then I ask the student what was the word. He may have got all the characters right. Just took him a little time. Doesn't know the word. Why? Because he's not retaining that in his memory. That needs to be expanded. The easiest way to expand it is get a little faster with your recovery time. A little bit faster, a little bit faster. And you don't have to remember it for so long. Now you know what the word was. So this is the first universal tool that we're going to learn. We know how to spell now. But that's still a little hard. That's maybe as far as a lot of people get. And how long does this take? Well, it depends on the person, really. But I can tell you in about 5 weeks, I've never had a student yet that didn't know the code. So it's not like it takes years. You just have to be diligent in your study and not abuse your brain. Now, if we keep this in our brain, now we've got some speed. We got something that we can work with here. You've learned a lot. After this, your brain is going to start taking over because it's going to be so fast that you won't be able to coax it. You won't have to go, oh, brain, what was that? What was that? No, that won't happen anymore. It'll be just like English. If I say C, and we're talking about the alphabet here, C, if I say B, how fast did you recognize that was a B? Instantaneous. Instantaneous. Same thing. If I go dotted at it, it's going to be instantaneous if you're a skilled operator. Works the same way. Same way. And if you've got it that fast, then you have a chance to retain some of this. So the links now are starting to get stronger as you do the repetition. Stronger and stronger. You're getting faster and faster at recalling characters. And now you can easily spell words. Your mental acuity is lengthening out a little bit. And you can see the difference. You can see something's working here that didn't work before. So we're just remembering sounds in short-term memory. Now, there's a little hint that I've kind of learned that operators sometimes take for granted, and I did too. Oh yeah, this all happens. It's just wonderful. But how does the brain work doing this? Well, we start working on things that as the code gets faster, and we want to get faster, that code is going to be faster than we can either type, write it down. I like to teach real life code. You're not going to keep 1,000 contacts in your head all the time. You're going to get fast enough to where you can start writing things down, but the code will be faster than you can write. Now what? Now we're back to the beginning here? No, we're not, because you've worked on your mental acuity. If somebody sends you on the air something that you can't anticipate, words you can anticipate, and we'll go over that a little bit here, but call signs you can't. You don't know. So somebody, let's say, sends you WB6ABC. Boom, right by you, whatever your skill level is, but it's faster than your skill level. WB6ABC. So you type or write down WB6, and he's done. There's no more coming in your headphones. By the way, always use headphones when you're studying. Makes you concentrate better. You might get WB6, he's done. Now, if this skilled operator can type in ABC, the suffix of the call, how does that work? That's copying from behind. You're retaining it in your brain, but what are you retaining? Are you retaining ABC, or are you retaining the sound of ABC? And I had to stop and think about that. I just took it for granted. And I'm retaining the sound. Am I special? Sorry. All these things that happen, no, you're not special. This is the way the brain works. The sound. And then the brain is pretty smart. I didn't teach it to do that. I just assumed it was kind of doing ABC, and I was typing it in. Everything's fine. But it's the sound. So your brain essentially has a little recorder in there that can retain that sound. A finite amount of sound, but ABC is not too much. And you can decode it at your own speed, right? Or your own hunt and peck speed. We're not talking about teaching typing. Use these two, and that's fast enough. Why? Because you've got a storage up here. Type it in, and you've got it. So I asked several other people that I know that are pretty good at code, good operators, fairly fast. And I asked them, when you copy from behind, what sticks in your brain? How do you complete the call? And they had to think about it, just like I did. We just take it for granted. We do the same thing in English. It's sound, and they decode it, because you can decode, what, 2 milliseconds? It's not a problem to decode the sound at your own speed. All right? So even in the beginning classes, I teach the students, try to remember the sound. Don't try to decode the word. If it flies by you as we get a little bit faster, because we're not sending individual characters anymore. We're going to be sending whole words. Just remember that sound of the whole word. We do the same thing in English. Now, you can catch up to it, in other words, that by this method. So you no longer have to be coaxing your brain to do anything. It just does it. And it tells you, okay, here's what it is. That is a epiphany when that happens. I tell the students, this will happen. It may happen in several weeks. but it will happen to you. If it happens to you, report back and tell us what it was. Yep, Bill, it happened. It sure did. I didn't have anything to do with it. So this is a real thing. Now, we were talking about 20 words a minute, and 20 words a minute, my gosh, that's extra class license territory in the old days, and it's pretty fast. Well, again, we're comparing this to English and all the things we know in English that we can use in CW that are already encoded in our brains. The average person in English talks about 130 words a minute. 130 words a minute. 20 words a minute is nothing. Is nothing. You just have to learn how to do it right. So the next step we take, and this is from here on, a lot of people don't get to this point. And it's too bad, because at this point it's starting to get easier. Yeah, we're still having to spell out words to get them maybe and all that, but now we're going to do just like English, only we're going to do a little bit in reverse. Remember the dog in the house? Dog, you know it was dog. You learned how to spell it later. Well, we're learning the alphabet first, because we already knew the alphabet. We didn't know that when we were just looking at the dog for the first time. So now what we're going to do is, now that we've got the sounds of the letters pretty good, why work at this hard spelling business? It's a good tool. We'll still use it. It's the standard tool. We can copy in our heads characters, retain them, put them into words. If I say CAT to you, how fast do you know that was what it was, a cat? Instantaneous. If I go da-da-da-da-da-da to a skilled operator, the same thing as saying cat to you, if you don't know code. So things happen fast. So the next thing we want to do is word recognition. We want to make things a little bit easier. So now, instead of copying individual characters and having to put them together to make a word, why don't we just learn the sound of a whole word? And so we start learning, and we never used to do this, common words. Common words that are used in almost every sentence. As a matter of fact, some sentences have more common words than they do words that are not in our vocabulary. What we're doing now is building a CW vocabulary. You already have a great English vocabulary. You know how to spell most of the words in your vocabulary. That's not a problem. So let's make some more links, huh? Some more synapses. Linking into those. So we take words like and, the, it, as, simple ones, usually not too many letters long. And we learn the whole sound of the word. So if I take the, which we know is THE, if I say THE, how fast do you know that was the? Instantaneous, right? When I said it. To a skilled operator, I can go da 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 da. I don't care what those letters are. I don't care at all. I just hear the whole sound, just like you heard. The. Well, what if I ask you to spell the? You could do it instantaneously. THE. Same thing. Same thing. So we have to build a vocabulary. If we build a vocabulary, your brain is going to take a big vacation. It doesn't have to put letters together anymore. If I had to spell out everything I was saying in this video, you'd turn it off and I wouldn't be doing it. Okay? So think about that. That's our next step, to build a vocabulary of words that our brain can pretty much take a vacation. It's much easier than me spelling out everything. So that's our next step. We learn words. And depending on your activity that you're going to do, you need some kind of vocabulary. You did in English. You have to get by some way. But we expanded that. Now we have a big vocabulary. Same thing with CW. Build your vocabulary depending on what activities you're going to use. And you may you go to different activities in CW over the period of time. Of course, the one that uses it the most, the vocabulary, what is rag chewing? Talking on the air, just like having a conversation. That requires a larger vocabulary. You have to study that. That just doesn't come, and it didn't come with just English either. You had to study it, and it took years. It won't take years with CW. You'll go pretty fast. If you are a DXer or you're a contester or you're a SOTA or you're POTA, it's going to be very small. But you still, if somebody asks you a question, a basic question, you want to be able to understand it and answer it, right? So you need a basic vocabulary to get by. So that's the next step that we take in our learning. Now things are getting easier. We're starting to do things that help us. You know, it's not that hard anymore. So when we do that, we find that our speed is getting faster, our recognition is getting faster. It just helps out immensely. And what is the next thing that happens? Now this happens in English too, and we don't even maybe even know about it. We take it for granted anyway, and that's neuroplasticity. I mentioned it just before. When we started, neuroplasticity is your brain, in layman's terms now, kind of making a best educated guess on what's coming up. And when this happens, it'll make you stop and think, where in the world did that come from? And we can do a little bit of that in English right now. I can't interact directly with you people, but let's just say this neuroplasticity works best when you have some context. We now have a basic vocabulary. Now we can start to understand small sentences, maybe even little paragraphs, simple ones. And we get better and better at it. So we can have a context. What are we talking about here? So let me give you a context in English. What will happen is I'll give you this context and tell you a few sentences. And the last sentence will have a word in it, be a longer word. It wouldn't be in our CW vocabulary. Normally, we'd have to start spelling it out. It wouldn't be an easier word that we use all the time. But your brain is going to figure it out if you have context. This happens because now we're getting speed. We want all the help we can get, right, to understand this. So I'm going to tell you, I have a problem with a kitchen appliance. It doesn't work anymore. And I need to go down to the store and buy a new one. So go down to the store and I look at these new appliances. And I open the door. I stick my hand in the REFRID ... and it was cold. What was the word? And most likely you came up with refrigerator. How did you know it was refrigerator? I didn't give you all the spelling of it. Wow, some link happened there. Something fired off in the brain that said, 99% sure if it's a kitchen appliance and it's cold and it starts with a REF, probably refrigerator. And that'll happen. It'll happen really quick in CW, and you'll go, wow. Now, that happens all the time to us in English. We don't think anything of it. So That's one of the last things that happens as you gain speed. It just little things like that, that skills that you already have in English, transfer over to CW because we're kind of linking in using the same parts of our brain, keeping it all in the audio part of it. Keeping it, if you keep it there, you'll be a lot faster. You won't dead end. So that's one of the last things. The other thing is you keep studying, repetition, 1 word a minute, 2 words a minute, maybe faster. Always remembering to keep in the 60 to, look at the part 1, 60 to 85, 90% category. You have to be right all the time. All the time. As you go up in speed, I don't care if you're going from 8 to 9 or you're going from 35 to 37, you better keep that 60% going, or else you're going to be frustrated. But you know that by that time when you're at higher speeds. You wouldn't have gotten that fast otherwise. But when we first start, we need to know that. We need to keep that in mind. Don't go jumping up 5 words a minute. If you drop down below 60%, which will happen because it's too fast for you, you tend to get frustrated. And even if you don't get frustrated, it takes you longer to achieve those small goals on the way to your much larger goal. Maybe it's 15 words a minute. Maybe it's 20 words a minute. Whatever it is, don't try to go from 0 to 20 words a minute. Little steps. Much easier, more linear. You don't get any of this stuff. No plateaus. So now, to sum up, studying Morse code is more viable than ever. It helps your brain get exercise. It gives you a new mode to operate if you're a ham. Even if you're not a ham, you can study code. You can use applications to keep you sharp, keep your brain sharp. It's just like doing a crossword puzzle or anything like that that you might do. It'll really help you out. So I wish you luck doing this. Keep these things in mind. They really help out. So 73, we'll talk to you later. Bye-bye.